Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Gabrielle Hossain, for those who don't know me, and welcome to the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, to those of you who are new to our graduate seminars. We have a series of graduate seminars today with our MPhil and PhD students presenting work. If you all wish to come back at 11:30, we have Marissa Thompson presenting her final PhD seminar on gender and food regimes in Trinidad and Tobago, doing very interesting work on masculinities and entrepreneurial femininities. At 1 o'clock, we have Angelica Rodriguez Ben Cosme, sitting over there. 1:30, who's doing very interesting work on furniture design and gender in the Dominican Republic. So feel welcome to come back again. Currently, at this moment, we have Amilcar Sanatan, whose MPhil work is engaging in a creative thesis by practice, which includes a creative component, and his thesis topic is Masculinities in the 21st Century Caribbean, exploring masculinities, privilege, and Androcentrism through Caribbean essay writing. And his assessors this morning will be myself and Dr. Angelique Nixon. Amilcar, you have 20 minutes, and then we can have discussion and questions.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Gabrielle Hossain, Dr. Angelique Nixon, my assessors, members of staff, as well as members of the public and friends. Look around this room and you can see the simple ways we use fabric, pieces of discarded paper, bright paints to give life to our walls at the IGDS. My desk in the office had a wall to stick notices, but who wants to notice notices every morning? Like Dr. Hossain, who has Fidel Castro in the Sierra Maestra talking to his commandant, is Mrs. McPhil, who has a Cuban revolutionary calendar, or revolutionaries that Miss Catro, who has a Kamla cup and post-its that I saw at her desk. I took the initiative to decorate my wall. I put together a sort of collage of all my icons I could squeeze together in 10 minutes on Google Images. Years later, I've come to realize that all my icons are both hypersexual and hypermasculine leaders, almost exclusively. On my wall, the only other non-men that make this position alongside the Allende's, the Bishops, the Castros, the Naipols, and the Kravitz would be Amy Winehouse, my mother in a typical mother and child pose and posture and doubles. So this wall made real my unconscious feelings of what I had towards understanding my Caribbean and more so myself. This, of course, occurred against the backdrop of my upbringing. I was born into a home with my father's library. We still have over 6,000 books. My mother was also a librarian. Shelving my imagination through Walcott's Tijan and his Sons, A House of Biswas, In the Castle of My Skin, Manly's Up the Down Escalator, The Western Trial by Cheddy Jagan, and everything in the nationalist pan-Caribbean left-leaning under the Third World Sun. These books framed my ambitions as a Caribbean man, but my encounter with feminism would change a lot of this radically. This study is an interrogation of what it means to be a Caribbean man today, based on a pro-feminist engagement with the men at the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus. The thesis is a research in practice. Part of the project is a MSc thesis outlining the scholarship of masculinities and the essay form in the Caribbean. The other part of the project is the production of a collection of essays situated in my experiences, accounting for my Afro-Trinidadian male, heterosexual, and middle-class positionality. This morning I will discuss the rationale for my study, then why I employ a feminist methodology to interrogate masculinities. Later, I will highlight my contribution to Caribbean feminist knowledge, and finally I will historicize the Caribbean essay form and show why I critique androcentrism and use male privilege as my guiding gender concept in my analysis. I want to critically reflect on the androcentrism found in the Caribbean essay form by highlighting the ungendered nature of the writing and thus the masculinized writing of the Caribbean space. I argue that essays on the Caribbean therefore need to assent to a range of concepts in order to understand the gender poor relations of Caribbean society, especially patriarchal gender relations. To achieve this analysis, one of the key guiding concepts in my work is on male privilege. This concept will be further discussed in the conceptual framework. This is why I'm also in the process of producing a collection of essays of my own that build on 3 decades of Caribbean feminist scholarship to investigate my understanding and engagements with feminism. In addition, I want these essays to contribute to a less androcentric popular culture in the region. To begin with, I declare that I employ a feminist research methodology in my study. In this chapter, I go on to explain why I ground my research in feminist theorizing, especially in relation to developing the focus group as a consciousness-raising space for men. Descriptively, the idea of feminist research methods presents a number of challenges. It is neither a method designed exclusively by feminists, nor is it a method to be executed by all feminists. A feminist method is an approach to methodology that adopts and adapts feminist theory and feminist research ethics. A feminist research methodology is useful for the following reasons. A. The research design and analysis make a serious engagement with gender power relations in relation to the topic of investigation. B. The research registers and validates reflections of research in participants and researchers. And C. There is a concentration on the relations of power in the research process among participants and between the researcher and the participants. I would like to thank my supervisor for guiding me to a unique research design, one that is creative, flexible, and multifaceted. My methodology includes 2 main components. 1, I drew on the undergraduate course Gen 2013 Men and Masculinities in the Caribbean to provide themes for discussion in my essays and focus groups. And 2nd, I ran a focus group for male participants, students at the UWI, for 12 sessions. I drew on the course, that's not course literature in it, right? That's my pillow and Fidel Castro. I drew on the course for themes on masculinity, as well as to recruit participants from the first class lecture. Men and Masculinities help guide the thematic approach to the focus group. In addition, it has exposed me to male students from which I could draw on for my focus group to provide a more personal space for conversation that was not possible in the course lecture and tutorial. Organically, I allowed the research group to snowball. For example, one participant brought as many as 5 young men who were not registered in the course as attendees in various sessions. The size of the focus group would range from as large as 11 participants to as low as 3 participants, especially around periods of examinations. The themes included in the course outline are why pro-feminist men's movement building, mapping patriarchy, privilege and masculinities, male marginalization, thesis and debates, feminist masculinity and pro-feminism, popular action, battling for social change, gender socialization, childhood and masculinity, masculinity in popular culture, violence, homophobia and the policing of masculinity, and last, activism and masculinity studies. The reason behind choosing the course Gen 2013 was owed to the redesigning of the outlines content for 2016, which emphasized pro-feminist men's movement building. And this fed smoothly with the aims of my desire to produce a book around pro-feminist men's movement building. Moreover, I wanted to get a reflection on the possibilities for pro-feminist men's movements by both meditating on the course and what it is able to stimulate, as well as develop a discipline and writing process of personal reflection to inform my essays. In qualitative research, a focus group is a research method that involves a group of individuals discussing a particular topic or subject area that allows the researcher to collect data in a social setting. Accurately and true, note that a focus group can serve not only as a method of trust building, but also as a method of data collection. As it is most straightforward, the focus group takes to social research the idea that 2 heads are better than 1. In my study, the focus group allowed me to do the following. 1. Collect participants' reflections on the course. 2. Collect participants' reflection on my essays that I read in the focus group. And 3rd, collection of reflections overall on the theme, as mediated by the course, the essay, and myself. The men in the research have consented to share their information for my data collection purposes, while their names remain confidential in my findings. In the focus group, I must admit, I have drawn very close to the young men over a period of time. I remember in the first session that I shared, this is not a therapy group, this is a movement building exercise. In the last session, one respondent said, I know you keep saying that this is not a therapy group, but for me it was therapeutic, not feeling alone, hearing other people's experience and mine. This shows that consciousness raising and movement building does not only engage in rationality, but also the emotional. Perhaps I unfortunately thought at first the group would give therapy, that a group being seen as a therapy group was seen as soft and a turn off to the other young men to participate in it. In my researcher's notes, I record my fears about the group. One being that some of the classmates thought that this may have simply been a one-on-one with the course coordinator that may help them with their exams later on. I was unsure why the men kept returning each week. One respondent said that homophobia lecture showed him he was lapsing because he did not account for gay persons' struggles in his visions for social change. Another said that he came because the room was both useful, sharing how he felt without judgment, and learning the concepts in the course in a real way, as he put it. I believe in these statements, they validate the words of Paulo Freire, which is, liberation is a praxis, the action and reflection of men and women upon their world in order to transform it. Now, I will briefly discuss the dialectical relationship between the interaction between my creative writing process and the focus group engagements with men. I identify as a writer and a performing artist, and over the years I've developed a public persona and engagement from the engagements with my blogs on my website and participation in public fora organized by state and civil society. In 2013, I became a research assistant at the IGDS here in St. Augustine. My growth in the academy and my investment in and learning about Caribbean feminist scholarship has challenged my writing, but more specifically my creative imagination that has spoken for years through an androcentric canon. In the focus group, I prepare my essay and also gain feedback from the participants, guided by very simple questions. What connected? What did not connect? Did anything stick out to you, and why? Is my writing effectively engaging the theme? I was urged to be more real. By that they meant showing deep honesty and exploring my ambivalences and contradictions which come to terms with my commitment to feminist politics while decolonizing a masculine ideal premised on dominance and control. For this reason, I am dedicating the months of May and June to long edits of my essays from session 1 through 7, because I only feel that I fully discovered my voice, and one that was highly relatable, by the 8th session. From this approach, I hope to make a pro-feminist intervention in literature and conversations on masculinity. The study specifically explores the contradictions of masculinity and men's commitments to social transformation towards a masculinity not premised on dominance. My project is to develop Caribbean tools in the popular form for men to have liberating conversations among men. My namesake, Amilcar Cabral, once shared, I'm a simple African man doing my duty in the context of my time. Likewise, I consider myself a simple Caribbean man answering the moral and political call of my generation. A Caribbean feminist contemplation and consciousness raising project on masculinity are necessary toward the realization of a fair, just, and decolonized Caribbean. For this reason, the title of my MPhil thesis is Masculinities and Feminism in the 21st Century. My research questions are as follows. How do writers in the Caribbean essay form take into account gender as a site of analysis? And second, what are men's feelings, anxieties, hopes, and concerns around pro-feminist men's movement building in the region? In my introduction chapter, I discuss and describe what an essay is, as well as thematically look at issues and concerns of essayists in the 20th century Caribbean. From this, I show why I'm particularly invested in the essay form for pro-feminist men's movement building, in understanding contemporary masculinities and gaining insights on men's commitments to gender justice. According to one poll, the etymology of the word essay can be traced to Michel de Montaigne, French Renaissance writer and pioneering essayist in 1580, who used the word essai, which is French for trials or attempts, because no genre called essays were codified at that time. One poll provides a description of an essay while noting the difficulty in establishing rules of what constitutes an essay with certainty. She writes, "When I say essay, I mean short non-fiction prose with a meditative subject at its center and a tendency away from certitude. My personal choice to use the essay format is to highlight the conflict of intentions and choices, the reflections that become clearer in looking back, and more concretely, the desire to explain life as it happened." Earle observes the Caribbean essay in the modern sense begins with Hostos, that is Eugenia Maria de Hostos, I think from Puerto Rico, and Jose, or Dominican Republic, and of course Jose Marti in 1860s and 1870s. In The Pleasures of Exile, George Lamin described an essay as a report on one man's way of seeing. Now, I don't know if his name is Yo or Yao, right? But she asserted an understanding of the essay as a public site for personal reflections. The essay can be seen as a space for the assertion of voices or alternative histories that have been suppressed or marginalized by dominant discourse. In a history of literature in the Caribbean, we have outlined the most comprehensive historiography on the essay form in English-speaking Caribbean. While it situates the question of identity as critical to the construction of the Caribbean essay form, the chapter neither significantly includes women's contribution to the canon nor the ways in which literature has examined gender identities. This chapter singly addresses the work of Sylvia Wynter and makes one reference to Michelle Cliff's If I Could Write This in Fire, I Would Write This in Fire, published in 1994. The omission of women's contributions or treating the Caribbean space as ungendered could also be found in the writings of a number of essayists, for example, George Lamin in Conversations, Essays, Addresses and Interviews, 1953 to 1990. On West Indian writing, where he makes no reference to women writers, with the exception of a passing reference to Edna Manley, the wife of Norman Manley. This makes me wonder, how is it that male writers at the time could define the canon of Caribbean writing with no recognition of their women contemporaries, little to no analysis of sexuality, including their own, and an incommensurable reflection on gender identities and power? It is precisely this androcentric reading of literature I am writing against. Androcentrism may be defined as the view that male behavior and characteristics are central. I don't know what I was supposed to mean now.
Are the norm.
And the norm? Are the norm, right? Central and are the norm. Androcentric text, thank you. Text and scholarship present women as absent or silent or treat them in stereotype ways. Aware of these limitations in the Caribbean literary canon, I would therefore like to A. Critique androcentric writing in my study, B. Use the essay form with a consideration for gender-power relations to shape the dialogues in the focus group sessions and my collection of essays. During 1900 to 1929, Caribbean writers were engaged in a period that witnessed growing black middle class, the circulation of racial consciousness through the form of Pan-Africanist and Indian nationalist ideologies, as well as an increasing consciousness around labor that would subsequently set the stage for the 1930s. Namely, the preeminent figure, I would argue, would be Marcus Garvey and the UNI, the United Negro Improvement Association, with his publication of the major press called The Negro World. At the same time, we also have the writing of Amy Jacques Garvey, and she also had a famous piece called Women as Leaders in 1925, where she makes the case for greater political participation of women in the process, while she critiques racism, which is white racism, as well as black male dominance in Pan-Africanist movement building. This is one of the first pieces of writing that we see intersections of race, class, and gender. Between 1930 and 1949, this period is obviously marked by large labor unrest and social disruption as the colonial architecture began to break. What we have is also a left-leaning literature taking its time in terms of the dominance of the ideology. Not dominance, but the left ideology is coming to its time. The currency of the ideas are being felt. We have two major Marxist writers in Trinidad and Tobago. A number of writers, I just pigeonhole on these two, which would be C.L.R. James from Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Claudia Jones. C.L.R. James would produce Letters from London based on his political arrival in London in 1932. Carol Boyce Davies would rediscover the work or reclaim the work of the black communist Claudia Jones. And in an end to the neglect of problems of the Negro woman in 1949, Jones articulates a race, class, gender Marxian analysis. In the interest of time, what I would do is say that I also mark two other periods, which is 1950 to 1969, which I look at what we call the golden era of Caribbean writing, which we produce the Walcotts, the Naipals, and the Selvons. And then we go into 1970 to 1989, which is a more radical political consciousness. In the 80s, we have a burgeoning of women writers, especially from Jamaica. And then the period of 1990 to 2009, which plays a very important part in the way I do my work, which is on masculinities writing, and also homosexual identities come to the fore, which allow me to account for my heterosexual assumptions. In literature review, I discuss the history of masculinity studies in the Caribbean following the chronology that Professor Reddock in her introduction of Interrogating Caribbean Masculinities laid, and advancing it as far as 2010, in that I do it periodically. I also draw upon US research to help understand how the world was considering masculinity studies as the Caribbean was theorizing it, whether explicitly in the field of masculinity studies or broadly in the field of social sciences. I do, however, submit to the point that I do not discuss masculinities and gender studies in the context of humanities, in which Lyndon Lewis has already flagged as being one of the early spaces by which the Caribbean has always thought about gender. Masculinities. I define masculinities as a social construction of maleness defined by cultural institutions, fluid over time and space. I would also go into more details if anyone is interested about which definition I operationalize. Pro-feminism, I engage in the debates around pro-feminism, whether men can identify as feminists, how do men participate in the feminist movement, and why it is I precisely operationalize a definition of pro-feminism which understands that feminist men, or men who identify with feminism, yes, we run the risk of colonizing the ideology by going into that room, but what are some of the negotiations do men make in that struggle for gender justice, having recognized that the job of dismantling patriarchy is not a woman's job alone. In my conceptual framework, I highlight the guiding concept of male privilege in my analysis in the focus group to bring awareness to men of the organization of power relations in everyday life. As one participant responded in the sixth section, I realized that patriarchy real us. Tarrant defines masculine privilege as the idea that society confers certain honored advantage on men simply because they are male. More importantly, Tarrant identifies the link between gender privilege and sexism. Masculine privilege offers men greater direct and or potential access to power, which ultimately eclipses equality between women and men. This concept was necessary for me. It became actually, I didn't impose what concept would shape the work, but in fact this concept was important for a group of men who largely identify as heterosexual, who largely came from all male prestige schools in South Trinidad actually. And male privilege was the way that men had to build awareness around to understand that gender injustice is real, that feminism wasn't a battle of the sexes, and that they had to confront their privilege in order to advance gender justice. In my chapter schedule to date, I've submitted the following chapters: my introduction and background, literature review, conceptual framework, and 12 draft essays. On Friday, 6th of May, I will submit my methodology chapter, and on the 8th of July, I will submit my 2 data chapters. In conclusion, I close my presentation here. I'm grateful for this opportunity to do a thesis with this design. I feel liberated by writing creatively with men in the group whom I have literally broken none with. We don't break bread. All fours shared a lot of laughs and challenged them on their political commitments to gender justice as they have challenged me and mine. I would like to thank chiefly my supervisor, Dr. Gabriel Hussain. I would also like to thank Dr. Angelique Nixon for criticisms and guidance. Big up to Dr. Suwan Barrett for feedback on my presentation. Many thanks to the Socialist Student Conference who gave me stillness of heart, the students and staff at IGDS, and the youth in Trinidad and Tobago like Hassan Ali from St. Joseph Convent who participated in one of the focus groups because instead of studying in school, you're studying by us. Who firmly want to place gender justice on the national and regional agenda. Thank you. I would like to now share my writing with you at a time, if I am allowed, on the story of the boy who liked beautiful things, which is one of my essays that I presented.
You wanted to read it?
Yeah.
How long is it?
Well,
How long is it?
8 minutes, I think.
Can you give us a part? Okay.
I will part.
Can you give me a part?
I will.
I'll give you maximum 5 minutes.
Maximum 5 minutes. Now the essays are episodic, so in that way I'll be skipping different ages and incarnations of Amilcar with long hair, short hair, and Paul. It went as far back as hearing my mother come home, the march of her high heels, tuck, 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 how she relieved her feet and chest of her professional fatigues, lie down in bed quietly saying thank you Jesus like a prayer after another long day, and open her body like a crucifixion. As she lay flat, we flocked to her sacred body, Marcus on the right arm, I was on the left. Fidel sat by her feet, like a sacred body. Like Pavlov, by the sound of her heels, I smiled when I ran to her room waiting for her on evenings. My auntie had similar shoes. I could tell the difference. The tock, 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 tick, tock, compared to my mother's distinct sound. To this date, people make fun of me when I wear my leather shoes and could tell that I am walking through the office corridor because it sounds like a woman in heels and it's just Amilcar. But for me, it's one of those self-reminders of the joy my mother brought when she came home. But as a child, my fascination was also with the shoe. How her feet angled in an unorthodox way, so different to mine, heel pillared in the air at a near permanent 45-degree angle, and as children do with things they learn to love, they play and explore. My mother relieved herself from her shoes, left toppled next to the nitro. I put them on and walked around the room, tried jumping in them and collapsing carelessly. She laughed the first couple of times until she thought that the performance, the curiosity lasted longer than a child play, and perhaps was more preference. She called me to the bed once and took the shoes off and put my father's on my feet. Try these, she said. So boring they were, so similar it was to my own church leather shoe. I never heard or heard my father's shoes, neither tick-tock nor in silence. He came home much later and was always out of the country. I wanted to walk in my mother's shoes. She hugged me, kissed my head, and that was enough for me never to try her shoes again. From then, she placed them in her closet as she came home from work. Tolerance is one of the watchwords in our national motto, but let me be clear. Tolerance in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago does not include homosexuals, and even the little boy who believes that his father's shoes are boring compared to his mother's. Worse, tolerance does not include understanding, connecting the stories of others to yours and knowing that all human suffering is real. That is what understanding could bring. In school, the word queer never existed. Lesbians were not our problem. We kind of liked the idea of possibly sitting between two because our penises were sort of a rod of correction, or so we thought. Gay boys and men who on boys were the social ills. Thinking about it, what I understand queer to be today would be some drunk Indian fellas whining at a Hindu wedding for rum and money, chucking variegated pelvic thrusts at the rhythm they create for some money to let you pass. Queer might mean those comedy shows that do more to show life back to ourselves so we could laugh. Queer is Larry Joseph in a pink wig, pum-pum shorts and his space teeth acting like a mummy. But we never said queer. Gay meant you spoke standard English, said shit like good morning to a group of boys or men who knew the correct answer all the time and liking your mother's high heels. We had bullers, makome men, anti-men, hen, fruits, fish, batty boys, but buller was enough. And we detested bullers. Not that you kissed a man or said you like another boy made you a buller. No, you just lost a fight or you didn't hang with the girls. You were not like us. In sixth form, Keston said that he had a bone to pick with me. I always suspected Keston to be gay. He was a pretty boy, hair always neatly trimmed, eyes marked, fluent in Spanish and French, smart, all the girls like him. He had a girlfriend that had nothing to tell me otherwise. He confronted me one evening in cyberspace on MSN Messenger. One Thursday, he asked, "Why did you send me a kiss?" Of course I never fucking did, but Kevin took the risk. Maybe to see if I was like him or even better at it. Popular, kissed the girls and made them cry, and on the inside I had some feelings towards another person that was special. He then shared 3 words, "I am gay." I felt each word was a loaded paragraph and came offline, blocked him, and we never spoke again since. We just walked past each other in school corridors as the girls continued to like him, grab his bottom for a laugh, ask him to go to class on dates, and we just ignored him. But my school didn't have room to be a buller. You had to pick bones with another buller man, not to talk in the corridor in school uniform. That was against our unspoken rules. MSN Messenger made we approach like we were strangers in a hookup. Why did you send me a kiss to start a conversation like boys without lyrical game do with girls? It would be dishonest of me to say silence governed the distance between us. I wanted to hit him, hurt him. That he ever thought I was like him. I thought of him as possibly damaging my reputation as a big boy in school. I told one of the boys, and he told his girlfriend, and she told a teacher, and the teacher told another teacher, and it rang the bell for about a week when he walked by. In a way, I knew the whispers could do more harm. Not that he could sing the best in church or music festival. Not that he was smart and helped me in my 5th form studies in French CXCs. He was just not one of us. But some girls protected Keston. Not because he was gay, but because he was Christian, a very strict one too. And maybe when he sang, it was not for his congregation, the Christian friends, the homophobes in uniform, or God that had him inspired, but it was he, channeling a hymn above his church roof for a religion that would not bring people like him to his knees in shame and repentance. Sometimes I would wish I could have a casual conversation with Keston or Aidan just to pick up and see if everything is okay, just to see how they're going, but you cannot heal all your past. When my father died in April, I left Milner Hall of Residence, North Block, a homophobic block that had no less than 10 gay residents in 1 year. One of the boys messaged me on Facebook to give thanks for making him feel safe, as he put it, while I was a resident assistant. That I was like his big brother, that I never spoke to a young man one-on-one, but in block meetings I always talk about treating people fairly and not having anyone feel excluded. When I last saw the politician Mr. Hines, I was at a carnival event. He drank his corn soup from a cup, and I was talking with my girlfriend. To his wife, he introduced me. This is Mr. Sanatan. He's a beautiful man, and he has a beautiful mind, with a large smile on his face. Strangely, words not said have a way of returning. How beautiful it is to stand for justice. It is beautiful at the time I wore my mother's shoes.
We were to start at 9:30, so we have about 15 minutes, maybe 25 minutes at most for discussion. I'll go first to one of Amilcar's assessors, Dr. Nixon, and then we'll open up the floor for questions and comments. Okay, great.
Thank you, Amilcar. That was really powerful, and I just want to say that I really want to acknowledge your honesty and bravery in doing this work, because it's not easy. And I also want to say that you've done an extensive amount of work to get this project together, and I want to acknowledge that. So, great job. And I want to ask you a few questions about, one, my main question is if you can talk a little bit more about your process of facilitation during the focus groups. Consciousness raising as a feminist tool from the 70s was generally about the experiences in the room. And generally people came to that room with some level of, okay, we're all equal around the table and we're sharing. But with your position as a tutor and as someone who has a certain degree of power in the room as a postgraduate student and working with mostly undergrads and so on, how did you account for that? I wonder about that. I wonder about how that may, in terms of your own process of thinking through the research, it's clear how it's affected and impacted your creative work, and that's beautiful, and I see that being the major success here of your work. But I am wondering about that process of your facilitation. And then two, my second question, around confidentiality and ethics, your research ethics process. We know how small UE is, and Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad specifically. So how are you accounting for that? You had some photos, but you also said that you got consent and names are confidential. So I'm just wondering about that. If you can talk a little bit about your process there. How are you accounting for that in the research project and in the paper that you're producing?
Go ahead, Doctor. Okay, thanks very much, Dr. Nixon. To begin with, the history of research ethics would be that one of the things is that all the men in the group felt comfortable with sharing the images because I contacted them by phone.
Okay, great.
But also, they agreed to have pseudonyms, and actually became like a little joke because we started to speak in the pseudonym. So like, your name Darwin. I mean, the name's kind of hilarious with how they were invented, and that is how we stuck to it. And actually, it was important because I saw that as a way that it could really challenge the men to think about how they would, it would break a lot of barriers. So for example, we had an exercise, if I was the mayor, right, what would you have responded to critiquing Tim Key? And everyone wrote on his paper, as the mayor, right? So everybody was like, well, as the mayor, Mr. Mayor, right? And then we would put our papers in a circle, and then we would read each other pieces. Or sometimes you make up a fake name, and you head it on the paper, and you write the experience, and then we split it up among ourselves, and then we read, well, Darwin was saying this, right? Somebody called himself Beyonce, right? So like, it was a good experience because we created an activity around it, where it is that men could explain the different feelings that they had honestly around, and that is the way that on one hand it protected the confidentiality that they wanted in the output for the data, but also that we could creatively use it as an exercise for them now communicating their feelings honestly among participants. As it relates to the process of facilitation in the groups, as a mediator, that is a consistent theme that comes during the weeks. What started off as a fear because my supervisor could attest to this. I just didn't understand why men would come to a men's group. And I tried to place myself in undergrad at 19. You know, it's not like we were getting food or anything, you know, it's like, what is, you know, like, and like, you wouldn't get marks. And so many of the students were not in the course after a while, right? Not because of the job. So many students were not students of Gen 2013. And I actually, so the first session I asked, what can I do to keep you here, right? And they would be like, no, just be honest and do that. And I realized that men wanted a space to discuss issues, but they were also open to being challenged, which was very interesting, right? And I think that is why I also come to terms with that there must be some level of power I hold in terms of knowledge, that I had the ability to mediate the conversations, that it wouldn't lend itself to another patriarchal space where they could create a corner from the lecture to vent their frustrations with a doctor who sang as the course lecturer, which some of the data would show that they would have a difference of opinion, but question the legitimacy of teaching or a woman teaching certain topics, that I must be able to mediate those conversations to say that, okay, why don't we consider this? Why are you saying this, right? To keep challenging them to think about questions in the interest of gender justice. And that is where I think my role as mediator. The second thing is with the consciousness raising position, in that what is particular, dare I say that this is consciousness raising among oppressors, may I put it that way, which is contrary to where the origins of consciousness raising came among the oppressed, right? There is a type of liberatory praxis that Paulo Freire also talks about, right? For oppressors to become solidarity builders with the oppressed. And that was part of the way that I conceptualized the room and thinking about the focus group. And that's why male privilege, therefore, was central for the way that we would have our discussions, or premise upon which we would have our conversations.
Thank you. Do you have any more questions? Okay, I'll open it up to the floor. Comments, questions, everyone. Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment.
Tell us who you are.
Oh, hi. My name is MPhil Stewart, and I am a student of the Institute of International Relations. Just a comment about, there was a part where you spoke about, you were trying to remind the focus group that it wasn't about a group of therapy, but a group where you all could rationalize, and you were trying to bridge the gap. Just a comment to just say that I think emotional rationality is a legitimate form of rationality. Having a space where people could talk about the emotions and whatnot is a legitimate way of rationalizing on the whole. I would ask, well, I didn't get to actually read your entire historical chapter, but I would imagine, you can say yes or no, that you would have probably touched on the idea that a post-colonial effect, I would say, on our writing or essays would have a kind of effect on how we deal with this whole thing about essays in the Caribbean, male I don't know if I explained myself properly, sorry, I'm start over. The whole idea that we've been always, growing up, we've always been reading Shakespeare and male writers, and then now we have to read male Caribbean writers. I don't know if you would have touched on that, or if that was important in your writing.
Yeah, sure. Continue.
No, let's take a few different comments so we can hear from who's.
No problem.
Floor is open.
So this question. I did miss the beginning of the presentation, so apologies if you covered this, but I was interested in your connection between the historicising of Caribbean essay writing with kind of modern day understandings of masculinity in the focus groups, and I wondered if contemporary essay writing was included in your study, or if not, what the reasons were for that.
Excellent question.
I'll take two more and then he can answer.
That's all. Hi, Amilcar. Thanks for the presentation. I really look forward to the finished product, especially the essays. So my question is, about your engagement with homosexuality or non-heterosexuality in the work, and I'm thinking about like the story you read and that instance of your mom putting away the shoes and you never wearing it again. And I'm wondering about like, well, what is your engagement with non-heterosexuality in the work, and what you see as the importance of dealing with this to destabilize androcentrism, which is, I guess the main aim of your project.
One more?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to...
Sorry, Karen, just tell us who you are.
Okay, hi, my name's Marisa. I'm a PhD student in the Institute here.
Nicole.
Okay. I'm a PhD student at the University of Toronto, and I'm visiting UE and IGDS for the next year.
I'm Tyrone Ali, a PhD student here. Hats off, right? Excellent work with the promise of profound creativity coming across to inspire us all. There was a lot of reflective apparatus at play here with attention to the muse and what inspired you in producing. I wanted to find out two things basically. When you say Caribbean essay writing, are you depicting the creative novel form, the literary writing, or are you talking about essay writing in terms of the critics as well who would have critiqued literature? That's one. And two, when it comes to looking at androcentrism and masculinism in the essay writing, are we looking at how authors, be they male or female, treat masculine figures, or are we looking at the absence of female authors as well, and the prominence of male authors when you talk about Caribbean essay writing? And the last dimension of the question is there a potential binary being set up about authorship or subjects of Caribbean literature that are largely heteronormative and a focus group that could be seen as simply another or the other that is not or non-heteronormative, that will have the potential to generate certain preconceived notions about the study, as opposed to it evolving and emerging, and coming out of the study will be the distilled findings that are not preconceived. And I could clarify if that confused.
Let's go further on the last point, Mr.
The
Ali.
first point I'm asking is...
No, the first and second.
Sorry, the last point. The last one, it's really a question that I'm asking is there potential binary being set up between a largely heteronormative authorship of the Caribbean essay form, be it in the literary writing or the critiques, against the perceived gender identity of the focus group that might simply be non-heteronormative, and therefore we have a non-heteronormative commenting on a heteronormative throughout the study. That's what I'm...
Okay, thank you, Amilcar.
Yes. Okay. To begin with, shortly, MPhil, most definitely as it relates to that emotional type of logic that we validate, and that's part of like feminist writing, that they do validate that kind of way of knowing that is important. Also in the historicizing, I do look at the male writing in the Caribbean. One of the things as well, we need to understand that, for example, nationalism itself, or there's a kind of male attack against the state or colonialism and so on. And I'm just trying to simplify it here, like I don't want to make it reductive, but there's a way that we have peripheralized themes, right? Like about family and relations, or like a story of abortion or childhood, as not very that kind of important compared to decolonization in this particular way, right? Thinking about blackness and whiteness, right? And that is the way that it has created. So in terms of what are soft themes, what are hard themes, are male themes and female themes, and so on, and that has left a certain kind of gaps in the way that we consider or value male writing and female writing. I'm not trying to say that men and women exclusively talk about one theme or the other, but there's a way we have privileged certain themes and by certain authors that have shaped a canon in which I inherited as well. And I also like in my footnotes, talk about the canon also excludes like non-Afro writers as well in the canon. So it's not just I say about women and so on, but there are certain exclusions and things that are made invisible, right, that we do not account for later on. Next, with Marissa Thompson, for sure, one of the things that I think with the group has allowed me to think about is, you know, feminism kind of say it all in terms of what men have to think about, right? Like, is there anything new that these young men are giving me that our scholarship did not think about? Like, I haven't yet to come across that, right? Like same old problems, just a new day. And in that way, that they don't access is very interesting. They don't access from the conversations we have, the literature of the Walcots, the Niples, and so on, right? But they inherit the tropes or the themes that what is being discussed there through the popular culture, whether it be through the songs and so on, or even Facebook and social media, where like one was sending me a picture of Meninist. He's like, yo, my brethren, upload this profile pic, what does this mean? I was like, you know, we discussed that last week, right? Oh, okay, I didn't know. And then like we just have these conversations. So there is a way that in popular media, they also see how it is that they can resist feminism. And that helps to describe, I think, the historical moment we are in, right? Which is that it's a period of male backlash. For Nikolai, thanks again. What is my engagement on non-heterosexuality, which has been a conceptual challenge that came from the beginning in terms of why it is I had to narrow my research, and also I say deliberately did not engage the issue of people self-identifying with sexuality because of the limits of time within the group, but also the size of the group, right? And I didn't want to confront what kind of feelings people may have had, and also somebody who so far up declared my kind of heterosexuality. And if you read my stories, and I was aware of this in my notes, I came from a kind of hyper-masculine background, so my stories is like a kind of a hardcore guy trying to think about himself, you know. I want to sound bad, but it's like it's hyper-masculine trying to decolonize it, and I know that there will be limitations to what I would have, and that doesn't have to do with only sexuality, it has to do with my ethnicity, right? It also has to do with me as a middle-class observer of working class culture, right? I'm participating in certain ways and running back to a middle class retreat that keep me safe, right? And allow me to be in university and write essays about it, right? So there's a way that that I knew that I would have a certain reach, and also I would also have a certain lack of engagement because of the positionality that I declared up front, and I also continuously interrogated in my work. And that is something that I was very conscious of. But I do reckon with the literature, especially homosexual men, and especially the essays coming out from the 90s that allow me to think about that, especially the writings of Kai Miller in particular, and the way we think about masculinity. Mr. Tyrone Ali was definitely what I did take, and I spent like about some time looking at the Caribbean essays that I choose. So there's creative non-fiction that I describe it as. Why it is I had to use that broad categories, because sometimes I had to draw upon speeches that writers may have made, or a political publication that they may have had, because the idea of an essayist, right, in the Caribbean in the 1800s or the early 1900s, it might not have been as explicit, right, in his character because of the availability of publishing resources or also the medium that which it got popular access, right? It was ordinary journalistic practices as I consider it. Next, I do not look at, that's an excellent point, and I think I have to write that, not critics of it. It's less about the revisionists. I look at the prophets, right? So people who were writing about the history rather than the people who were criticizing what was done about the history, even though these essayists are critics of the Caribbean society. So in a way I put essayists in the form of social theorists. They are theorizing the society in a particular way. That is definitely a question I will take into deeper consideration after the seminar, which is on the way that I frame the Caribbean essay form, on do I look at the issue of how male authorship has shaped the Caribbean essay, how is it they are treated with male figures. No, I don't look at the novel. I explicitly talk about that's why I said I don't look at the novel, I look at the non-fiction form, which is essays by these writers. I also identify the writers who identify in a certain period, and but it's something that I will consider. And also, it's not just the exclusion of women. In this presentation, I flagged the exclusion of women just to help me clear the point of the androcentric lens, right, which omitted right, certain writers from the canon at a point in time. And the next, on the point of the group and the relationship, is the group now, do I assume that the group is non-heteronormative, or this group is transgressive in a way in terms of challenging the canon? It's not the assumption. It's what I did is that in the focus group notes, I also show what I build on with the course on feminist Caribbean scholarship. From the course, there's a certain line of logic from Caribbean feminist scholarship I use as not just critique, but as a way of thinking about discussions, and that is why I consider it as, dare I say, non-heteronormative compared before. So there are certain questions I draw upon in the literature of Caribbean feminist scholarship to rethink masculinity, as scholars as Barito have done, Shepard have done, and Critchlow have done, and many others, et al.
Final round of any burning questions or comments?
Milk, I appreciate all the work and effort that went into it. My question is just surrounding the focus group. If you're working with kind of free area and liberatory praxis and commitments to struggle, do you see a commitment to struggle galvanizing outside of the focus group now that it's over? And if not, I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate why or why not. Sort of, I think kind of what ends up happening is that we can be radical and emotive and share stories within therapy or focus groups, but then kind of free-arian notions of praxis is basically like, do we commit to to transforming material conditions? Do you see the focus group sort of a nucleus galvanizing around that towards a pro-feminist movement now that it's over, and to elaborate on why or why not that may happen?
I mean, that is the question of, so thanks very much, Dr. Levi. That is the question of my research. What is my measurement, right, in terms of getting them to pro-feminist action, while not ideologically imposing it? And actually there are two themes, right? So midway, you would see that the Baton for Social Change, which I talk about how it is public action is a way of learning. So that's about the 4th or 5th session. And then the last section, I asked them to reflect on the entire course, which is activism and masculinity studies, and how they feel about their commitment to gender justice. And in that way, the group is splintered. Of course, we have some men who are, like, pro-feminist. As a feminist man, I think like this. You have other men, patriarchy real, but, my mothers keep asking me this feminist thing. I only asking too much questions in the house, and so on. And I wouldn't want to assume that 12 weeks, right, with a postgraduate student would make you into taking all the action there is. And there are ways that now, what I think is that they account for male privilege, which is essential for the analysis that I think is the greatest output. But there are also some gems that, like, we had in terms of, their rich anecdotes. Like, one of the young men in the group, he did the popular action in the course, and he came back and he's like, I like this, but not running after feminism as you did, Amilcar. I understand it now, but I don't think this will help me into the police force. I don't think this will help me into the Coast Guard. And I'm not ready to come out the homophobic closet, right? And I think that was so profound, right? He said, you go the closet, he's like, I don't want to come out the homophobic closet, right? The idea of coming out the closet is for gays, right? He like, I don't want to come out of that, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I hear you out, but do you accept this? But he also recognized, he was like, on one week he said, I don't like to deal with non-dominant men, because especially when they talk with high voices and so on. I was like, what do your voice have to do with you, your personhood, and da-da-da-da-da? Now when he's taking public action, somebody made the same comment, and he's critiquing it, right? So public action is a way of learning. So what we have is I track not necessarily whether they identify as pro-feminist so that they take action, even though one was on a radio interview to talk about pro-feminism, and the next one spoke on International Women's Day by telephone for a radio station. What it is that I track is the degree to which that they were willing to understand their prejudice, but also to declare how much they were interested in acting. And we have some agents who want to transform those material conditions, and that is why there was a recommendation. I just don't want this group to finish. I was like, we're not going to give you a certification at the end of it, right? It's like, what we do next year? Can we be involved with a men's group? Should we have a men's group on campus? So there is a real interest in developing a men's group around gender justice. And for some other men, they just wanted a space to vent, to share, to learn, to be challenged, and also to think that they challenging your views, right? That was a genuine interest. And I try to measure those commitments.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.